take you back to the good old days. Let me take you back to the good old days. Let me take you back to the good old days. Oh, yeah. Let me take you back to the good old days. Let me take you back to the good old days. Let me take you back to the good old days. Let me take you back to the good old days. Let me take you back to the good old days. Let me take you back to the good old days.
Talofa lava malole soifua maua malelangi mama. Ni sambole vinaka ke munisaka na wekanda mai viti. Hello everyone and welcome to Talanoa with Tupe. This is a show where we celebrate and highlight Pasifika success. Now success can come in many forms, and what it looks like to one person may be completely different to what it looks like to someone else. So each week we're going to sit down with a different Pacific thought leader and find out what makes them tick. Today I'm in the studio with Elyjana Roach from Porirua in the Wellington region. Eliana is a Fulbright scholarship recipient who is undertaking a Masters of Architecture and Urban Design at Harvard University in 2020. Before we sit down with our guest, we have some helpers from the Pacific Social Justice League to test our knowledge on the Blue Pacific. How well do you know our region? Let's find out with this quiz.
Kia ora.
Talofa lava.
My name is Tuasivi.
And my name is Telesia. And we are members of the Pacific Social Justice League. And we're going to give you a quiz on our Blue Pacific.
Let's go.
Can you tell us which country this flag belongs to?
Can you tell us the capital of this country?
Can you tell us the name of the leader of this country?
And lastly, can you tell us what currency they use in this country?
Stick around to the end of the show so we can compare our answers.
See you soon.
Thank you, Telesia and Tuasivi. We'll have those answers at the end of the show. Up next, they say that who we are is a result of what we feed our minds, the shows we watch, the music we listen to, and the books we read. Our next segment is about Pacific literature, and it's presented by my good friend Leilani Tamu.
Talofa lava malo lelei whakalofa lahi atu. My name is Leilani Tamu. I'm a writer and a poet and an editor, and I'm passionate about Pacific books. The book I have for you today is called Tales of Nue Nukututaha, and it's written by Zora Filo and illustrated by Lange Tauwhelila. It's quite a big book, and it's really beautiful in that it includes a range of different illustrations as well as text in both English and Niuean. It's a wonderful book for all ages and really great for parents to read to their children. It has a range of different stories that originate from the legends of the island of Niue. There's so many things in here that I loved, but particularly stories about Tangaloa and the creation stories. And I love the way that Zora has really worked hard to ensure that the Niuean language is included alongside the English language, because Niue is an endangered language. And so for me in particular, as a mother of children who do come from Niue, this is very, very precious book. So I would highly recommend it, and I do know that Zora is working on future books, so keep an eye out on her work. If you're interested in more of my reviews or would like to contribute a review to my website, please check out my website below and get in touch.
Thanks so much, Leilani. After the break, we're joined by Porirua local Elyjana Roach, who will be studying a Masters of Architecture and Urban Design at Harvard in 2020. Welcome back to Talanoa with Tupe. We're joined by Elyjana Roach from Porirua, who will be studying at Harvard. Welcome, Elyjana, and congratulations on your massive achievement.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure having you here. And I love what you're wearing.
Thank you. Actually, my friend made it Talia, and her and her friend run a business called Layplan, so representing them today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And they're from?
Talia's from Porirua, and Lavinia's from Wellington but lives in Auckland.
Cool, cool. Okay, so today I really want to get into your achievement in going to Harvard and how that all came about and what your drivers and motivations are. But first, let's start from the beginning. So can you tell us a bit about your family background?
Yeah, so my mum is Samoan and my father is Australian. So my dad was born in Papua New Guinea. His parents were missionaries, and they basically helped build a community. They initially built like an airstrip with the locals, and they built a timber mill so that they could build other houses and a hospital. And so my dad grew up there for 5 years, and they moved back to Australia in Tasmania. So my nan still lives in Tasmania, and my mum moved over here when she was 14, and her dad was minister in one of the villages in Samoa. Then they met when they were in Wellington. So I have a younger brother and a younger sister. And we grew up in Porirua, lived there my whole life. Lived there throughout my studies at uni. Was the taxi driver for everyone from Porirua to uni.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realise that, so your grandparents on both sides were missionaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my mum's parents were, whaiwhiaus of e whakasa. And she was the second youngest of a lot of siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And so she grew up in a house where she was like, I'm not going to be a pastor. And then now they're both pastoring.
Yeah. And so tell us, what was that like being the child of pastors and growing up in the church community?
Yeah, my parents were always involved in church. So I grew up in church. I was homeschooled for a little bit, which was the best time ever because you could do whatever you wanted to learn and focus on. And we were always involved with stuff at church, stuff in our community. We spent a lot of time at the Creek Library where my auntie was the librarian. And so we'd spend a lot of time out the back of the library eating our hot chips, watching all the kids come home from school. So when my parents eventually did become pastors, it wasn't like a massive transition in that our life wasn't already involved with lots of other people. I think the biggest thing that I have taken away or just kind of learnt from being involved with my parents and our family in church is just valuing people. And it's amazing. You get to meet so many different people from around the world and people that you'd not normally connect with or have the opportunity to connect with. And so you become aware of different cultures and different people's experiences, and you get to journey with people through the best times of their life and the worst times of their life, through weddings and funerals and then like everything in between. So I think it has made me a bit more empathetic in the working environment to understand like maybe what people are going through and not always what they seem to project, and there's always things that are going on in the background that you just have no idea about.
Yeah. Your parents walked with us on part of our journey as well, so we're always, really appreciative of, what they've done for us. So I think it must have been amazing to be able to experience that firsthand and to be able to get to know people on that level. Yeah,
and my parents are funny, like they're awesome. And my mum's, like classic Samoan, protective mum of her kids. And then my dad's just very chill and really wise in what he says, and very, like they balance each other really well. And so I think having both of them has been really, obviously very key in my life, but also just understanding different the different ways to approach different situations. Yeah, sometimes you need to be like the fiery, you know, Samoan mum, and then sometimes you need to be like the chill Palangi dad that's all good with stuff. Yeah.
So which one of them homeschooled you?
My mum actually homeschooled both of my brother and I, but my brother was 5 when we started homeschooling, and so I would just get books and then work through them while my mum was kind of teaching my brother. So a lot of like self-taught stuff, and I just work through the books, work from like 7 in the morning to 11 in the morning, and then just have the rest of the day to do whatever I wanted to do.
Nice.
Then I went back to school, and I just thought it was such a waste of time.
Which was a waste of time, going to school?
Going to school, because you're just waiting for everyone. But it was a lot of fun. Like I had a lot of really good friends, and I mean, ended up in the principal's office because I was just so passionate about our learning. We had this one awesome school teacher, and she left, and it was like so heartbreaking. And then we had another teacher who just wasn't as good, and I didn't think that she was good at her job. So I said a few things, and then ended up in the principal's office with my friend. Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess you really developed your leadership skills there, right? Because didn't you go on to become head girl then?
Yeah, so when I went to year 8, after I was homeschooled, it was like a big culture shock, because I'd basically just grown up like in the East, like in a brown community, in a brown family, and obviously like my dad's white, but then I went to a Palangi school, and that was the biggest, like, oh my gosh, what? And it was at lunchtime, and the way I found, like, it was at lunchtime, and somebody just opened up their chips in front of me, and like didn't offer me any, and I was like, oh my gosh, how rude. And so I guess I like got to find where my feet in like a Palangi school, and then I went to Tawa College, of which at the time there weren't very many islanders as well. So that kind of set me up in a way to relate to a lot of different cultures, and also being involved with church, like you're always having to help out, or like serving in different ministries in the youth ministry, and so it was kind of like an easy transition to be involved in things at school, and like involved in all the choirs and the barbershops and the productions, and and look out for the younger kids, and yeah.
It's interesting. I kind of feel like Pasifika people in New Zealand, we always have that moment of culture shock at some stage in our lives, and sometimes you get it earlier if you go to a Palangi school, and sometimes you get it when you go to uni, or some people won't encounter it until they get out in the workforce, but there's always that like shock, like, oh, it's different out there.
Yeah, I think there's always like an initial, oh my gosh, and then there's like other incremental parts along the way where you're like, oh yeah, like some people just have no idea, and it's not their own fault that there are other cultures beyond their own culture. So yeah, that's really interesting, and it's obviously like still in the profession that I'm in, it's still like unfolding. Yeah.
So let's talk about architecture. So where did that inspiration come from? Was that something that you'd always wanted to do, or when was the moment you were like, I want to be an architect?
I have always remembered that I wanted to be an architect. My parents renovated a few houses along the way when we were younger, and so we're always on construction sites. And even our church building that we bought when I was about 10 was just a big old factory, and we spent a lot of time there with like pink mats everywhere, and using the chairs, running down, in and out of almost using the site as our playground. And I actually was thinking about this the other day. My dad used to have this book of a gold mining, like it was like people that were gold mining, and they had all these little pictures of like little cabins and all the like little tools that they'd use, and it kind of like sparked my imagination to put myself into those situations, to think, oh man, what would it be like in this cabin, and so my brother and I would spend a lot of time outside, because there were no like computers, everyone was outside. with
Back in the old
trees
days.
and back in the old days, making stuff and yeah.
So you've said that people think architecture is about buildings for rich people and for businesses. Do you think that's a fair assessment? And would you say that architecture is a space that's dominated by males and in particular Palangi males?
So the first question, I think that architecture is perceived to be only for people that have money, and that's like the 1% of, you know, the beautiful houses that you see online or in the magazines, and that's like one part of architecture. But I do think that it's just so broad and there's so many different parts of it that it should be accessible to everybody. And for me, what I think, like the mahi that I've been doing lately with the practice that I'm involved in, which is etch architecture, for a lot of our residential stuff, it's with like everyday people that, you know, like have a mortgage, are trying to have a nice space for their family and, you know, live well. And so our work has been trying to provide spaces for people that actually function. And I think like lots of people also have this perception that architecture is just about what it looks like, what things like look like on the outside, or the kind of materials, which is one part of it, and we're always going to be interested in the aesthetic as such, but it's not the main thing. And I think the main thing for architecture is like how spaces actually work and providing spaces that are healthy for people. Like fundamentally it's about well-being. And a lot of our state homes are not really built to code, you know, even though the code in New Zealand is a standard, but actually the proper living standard is above code. And so there's like this disparity between what the government sets out as what is quality living and then what is actually quality living.
Right.
And so it's interesting, that dynamic, because when we're doing our work and we're like, oh, okay, we're going to build to a standard that is actually good for you. And then people are like, no, but we want to just do it to code, and because this is the cheapest way we can do it. And so then we get like this tension between. Yeah, it's a fascinating profession to kind of like learn the ins and outs of, because there's so many different parts of it. Like even to just get something built is an achievement. Yeah.
And so what do you think you bring as a woman and as a Pasifika woman into the design of, you know, cities and buildings? Like, why is it important to have those perspectives there?
Yeah. Well, if you think about a city, that's such a complex thing, and it's not just one type of people. There's lots of different types of groups that in the city. Like I'm just thinking about Porirua, which is my understanding of, you know, how I grew up. There's one part of like a community, and then like 5-minute drive down the road, there's a completely different economic like income, or, and so it's so diverse. And for us to just say one type of person that represents one type of group to design or be involved in designing a city, that's not actually representative of all the people that live in the city and might use that space and understand how they live and understand what they might be thinking about or the things that they might be going through. So on a basis of, I think that's why there should be more representation of different types of people that are involved, because architecture is never just about one person that designs one thing and then it happens. It's actually so many different players that are involved, and which is what I love about it, because it's so collaborative, and it becomes a richness of outcome because of that layering of people that are involved. And to answer the other question that you said about like architecture being a predominantly male Palangi dominated environment, like that has been the case, and I've been blessed that there are other women who have like gone before and kind of tread the path. And there are not a lot of like Pasifika women in the industry, and if there are, you know who they are because you can count them on your hand. But in saying that, I work with Palangi males, and they're awesome. And there is part of me that's like, I have to be willing to have the grace to teach my culture and to actually be fully authentically who I am and what I bring to the table, and confident that what I bring is valuable, and then they have that respect that what I bring is valuable as well. So there's a bit of exchange in that process and respect in that process, and sometimes it hasn't always been easy because I've like lost my fuse, and some days like just, you know,
They can have great effect, right?
This is like, why is this my job to tell you, you know, how, but you know, I think that's having grace to understand that everybody has been brought up differently, and being open to have those conversations.
Okay, we've got to take a quick break now, but when we come back, let's talk about Harvard and urban design in Porirua. So, growing up in the church, it seems like service has been a really important element in your life. And in your final year of your degree, you put up a pop-up space called The City That Builds.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how you're giving back to your community through architecture, and how you're bringing those voices to, when you sit at the table, you know, you're bringing, you know, other voices along with you?
Yeah, so I started the beginning of my final year project, you do, you have one kind of topic that you do one full year, fully dedicated into it, and I was like I wanted it to matter, and I wanted it to be something that would be useful for the future instead of just something that would sit in a book and go in the library. And so I was thinking about, you know, my city in Porirua and what could be something that would be initiating for this moment, but also something that could evolve for the generations to come. And so everyone had been looking at that time in the city centre, like where the mall is, kind of coming out of the mall.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah. So I looked and focused on the harbour. And so Porirua means two harbours. So obviously the city is built around these two harbours. And in some ways it was also me, on one hand it was like I wanted it to be a big enough project that other people could feel like they could somehow be a part of it. And then on the other hand there was like this underlying theme of Pasifika people returning to the water, and how moana and the ocean has been so instrumental for, you know, our ancestors and their process of navigation to these other countries, and how moana is the thing that kind of combines everybody and it's a collective identity. And so, and then on top of that, the relationship of like the landscape with, you know, Ngāti Toa, which had been disenfranchised from the harbour because there was this huge reclamation of land. And now there was just big box buildings on the edge, and there was this like not a really great relationship with people to the harbour's land, to the harbour's edge. And if you think about any other big city that you've been to, there's always, that's like really fun and awesome. There's these water edges that have lots of stuff happening.
That's the
people
feature,
on the edge, you know, there's like people sipping their coffee and riding their bikes and stuff. And so I was like, we need to have this in Porirua. And the reason why I love public space is that it's it kind of democratizes and gets rid of like a hierarchy of who can use it. So anybody can use it. It's not like the rich people can use it and only like these certain groups of people can use it. It's accessible for everybody. So that was my thinking behind my final year project. And so I looked at how can we orientate the city towards the harbour, and what are the ways we can do that. And so I came up with a toolkit of ideas, of architecture ideas that you could deploy over time. And so I was like identifying different themes, art, you know, housing, industry, businesses, all the things that make up a city, and what are the things that we could do right now that won't take a lot of money or investment, and then what are the things that maybe could be implemented in the future, or things that take a longer time, such as a building. And so I tested out a few of those, and one of the ones I tested out was an art installation, and I put it on the harbour, and it was this big billboard that was of a drawing that I had done, which was called The City That Waits, and it was a drawing underwater to say that there's so much potential in the water.
Yeah.
And so I basically put this 3 metre by 6 metre billboard, like bang on the harbour's edge to say, hey, like, let's do something here. And then second to that, I did a pop-up space, which was to invite people of the city to start having a conversation about what they want their city to look like, and to have that in a public space as well. And so I had a few design interactives that people could comment about, you know, put a sticker on a map, you know, something as simple as putting a sticker on a map just gets somebody thinking about, actually, yeah, I would love a cafe here. I would love to occupy this space, and I'd love to ride my bike along this edge. And it's those things that enabling those actions or enabling those moments are what designers do, and is what architects do, and are thinking about constantly, is how do we enable people to use this space that they would enjoy. Because, you know, it actually comes down to well-being, and if there are more options that you have, those things contribute to how a community feels. And
I think that's really amazing, because you got people engaged in a conversation and really thinking about the city belongs to me.
Yeah.
You know, I actually have a say in how I want it to look and feel.
Yeah.
And what was the council's response?
So I did this wall, it was called the Finish Me wall, and there was 2 different questions that you could or like sentences you could finish. One was, Porirua, in my perfect city, there would be ... And so people would fill out, you know, would take it really seriously and consider what we need in the city. And so I had like a stack of these cards, and I presented at the council. One of them was like, okay, when do we start? You know, and I also had the opportunity to present at the Porirua Summit, which was a collective of all the business owners and developers from the city, and like major stakeholders of the city, and to share these ideas and to share these findings. And the mayor at the time stood up after I gave this presentation, was like, well, I think we should just hire you as our architect, you know. And I was like, yeah, awesome. You know, like this is why I started this thing, and I'm like, a few years later, I'm still waiting, but so those ideas have continued with the council in some form or another. So I've been working on getting youth voices into the district plan, which is, you know, a hefty document, a policy document about what the city looks like in the future. And so I've been working with some youth voices in Porirua to understand what they think is the priority out of 12 issues, and the first issue that came up was housing. And so we spent a lot of time going back and forth, understanding what the issues of housing were for them, what they think is important, and like home ownership, housing affordability, these types of things.
So all really big issues for young people in New Zealand.
Yeah. Yeah, and one that I think we need to have more conversations about.
Yeah, totally.
And more conversations with local body government about. And then the other piece of legislation that I have been working on with the council is called the Strategy 2048. So it's like a 30-year strategy for what Porirua will look like in the city. Not just the city itself, but, you know, around, and how it relates to Wellington, how it relates to, you know, up north. So that was cool to be a part of. Yeah. So
how did Harvard all come about?
Yeah.
And how has it been impacted by COVID-19?
Yeah. So I'm doing this project with a guy who owns a few of the buildings around Porirua Harbour, which was such a blessing that I've done this project basing my thesis on Porirua Harbour, and then I've kind of like had a hand in some things with the council, and then I meet these private developers, and one who has a very holistic view of what we should be doing. And so I've been working with him on, how do we activate the harbour? How do we bring community? How does it become this like place that people can occupy and own? And I was thinking, like, how are the different ways that I could add more value to this project and to him? Because cities, and like in the next 30 years, cities are going to be like exponentially like growing. We already know that cities are growing, and there's about 30,000 more people that are expected to come into Porirua for the next like 10 to 30 years. And then in Wellington as well, like about 80 more thousand people in the city of Wellington. And so this question of, where do they live? Where are the places that are best for them to live, that they're not disenfranchised from community, but they still feel like they're integrated? There's still infrastructure, there's still schools, there's still, places they can shop, places they can play. And so I was thinking about these things, and I thought, I need to upskill. I need to level up. And so I looked into starting this course, which is a Master of Architecture and Urban Design at Harvard. And I applied for a Fulbright scholarship, which I was very blessed to receive. And with that, I was able to apply for Harvard and to get into this course, which is super exciting because there's about 35 people in my class from around the world. And we've started class.
Yep. So online?
Online to begin with. So the first semester is online.
And is it available for you whenever you can do it, or like are they teaching live and you have to?
So at the moment, the first 2 weeks have been all synchronous classes. So from New Zealand 12 a.m. to about 4 a.m. in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
So I've changed my clocks to match Beijing time. So I'm running on Beijing time. And the first few days were like such a struggle, but now I'm getting used to it. And so I'm really excited, and I'm real grateful. I'm just really grateful for this opportunity and to learn as much as I can from these people who are teaching the course, who are, they're just like leading in the industry, and to be able to just be around these people and hear what their thoughts are and their thought processes is like such a blessing. It's so humbling.
I think it's quite cool that you embarked on this journey because you want to upskill so that you can help take Porirua to the next level. And you've started the study while you're still in Porirua.
Yes. And the other part is there's a project in Porirua East that's started, which over the next 20 years will evolve like $1.5 billion, and that's for like redevelopment of state houses and new houses. And so we, as our small company, we went forward to try and get involved, but it's harder because we're not a fully urban design company. And so I was thinking, man, if I had the skills as an urban designer and an architect, it might have been a bit easier, and it might still be a bit easier to be involved in other projects that I think are important, such as the one in Porirua. So hopefully when I finish and also get some other work experience, that there's still projects in Porirua and in Wellington and New Zealand that I know there will be.
So Eliana, what advice do you have to any Pasifika person out there who wants to pursue a career in architecture or a career in any profession where they currently don't see themselves reflected?
I would say go for it and be yourself, and know that what you have to bring to the table is just who you are is so much more than enough, and it's so invaluable.
Awesome. That's a great message. You are enough.
Yeah, you are enough.
Okay. Now I have some quick fire questions to round off our interview. So first up, what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh my gosh, we did this the other day. I would say Cruisin', because that was the last karaoke song that I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
good choice. Who was the most influential Pasifika person that you knew growing up?
Oh, probably my mum. Yeah. Yeah.
She's very influential.
Yeah.
Okay, if you weren't in your current profession, what would you be doing?
I'd either be an astronaut or a chef. I have a long list, to be honest, of what I would be doing. I'm so interested in lots of things.
If you could invite any 3 people in history to a family dinner, who would it be and why?
I would invite my granddad, who I never got to meet, my father's father. His name is Austin. And to be honest, I would invite anyone else because I just have so much to catch up on, and so I think it'd be a bit rude because I'd be like a one-man.
Okay. You don't want to make the other guests feel left out.
No.
Okay, and the last one, how do you want to be remembered?
Oh, that I love people and love God and have a heart to serve people. Yeah.
Awesome. Elyjana, thank you so much for being on the show. We're just really excited to share your story and just very blessed to have you as our guest.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really awesome. Yeah.
In our next segment, we call in some parenting experts from the Martin Hautus Foundation Trust to give us their top tips. Parents are a child's first and most important teachers, and this has never been more true than in 2020 when many of us have been homeschooling for the first time.
My name is Maretta Solomon.
And I'm Maretta Solomon-Mua. And so for the last 10 years, we've been delivering a parenting program that focuses on a different idea each week to help our parents build more positive communication and bond with their children, because parenting is the most important job that one will ever do. However, our precious gifts do not come with a manual, so that's our aim each week, to build more positive communication and bond.
Tip for this week is describe your child's feelings. Don't ask him what he is feeling because he is unlikely to have the word for it. Try to understand what your child is feeling or wanting. Are they tired, hungry, or frustrated because they don't know what is happening? Label your child's positive feeling, like being happy or proud, excited, enthusiastic, or calm, more often than their negative feelings, such as sad, angry, or frustrated. Model feeling language yourself. I am proud of you, or I am having fun with you. Thank you for joining us. If you would like to know more about Martin Hautus Foundation Trust,
You can like our Facebook page and see the details on the screen.
Thank you for those awesome tips. I can completely verify Maretta's parenting expertise as she is my mum. Okay, now to answer those burning questions, please take it away, Telesia and Tuasivi.
Welcome back to the PSJL quiz.
Let's compare our answers.
This flag belongs to Kiribati. The currency of Kiribati is Australian dollar.
The capital of Kiribati is Talanoa. The leader of Kiribati is Prime Minister Taneti Mamau.
Thank you for joining us and hope you did well.
If you want to join the Pacific Social Justice League, follow us on our social media platforms. Mother!
Thanks everyone for joining us today. Now to end our show, we have the sweet sounds of Soul Brown and the Soul Sisters. Whawhataiti le lava mo le tātou polokalame le nei aso. Soifua ma ia manuia. See you next time on Talanoa Tupe.
Guess it was beautiful to see you. Although you hurt me real bad, I still forgive you for the times you put me down, for the times you were to
Love will never stop if we're near or far apart of me. I can see that you're working real hard, yeah. I see you doing your thing, baby, why you stressing? If you need company, just send us a message now. Come over to yours tonight and give yourself love and attention. Baby, today we get to mention that you're not my enemy.